or anything like that. The key things to remember is you have to decide before you put the ink in if you want to keep the marble in or out. It's just a noise maker if you leave it in because it's not really needed.
Oh, okay.
Unless you're using acrylic, then you do need it to help mix it. But
Yeah.
for the Neuland water base, we don't. And then when you take out this top part, it actually has two pieces. And you want to keep those two pieces together. Otherwise, the spring will come out and then it's kind of fussy.
Right.
And then you just pop that back in. And then when you put the top back on, you actually have to go counterclockwise, which is opposite of what we usually do. And then, of course, you have to pump it. And you have to pump it like this, almost straight up and down on a horizontal surface. If you wait to pump it on the wall, then you're going to have a nice, beautiful, colorful waterfall. So, yep. And it looks like I used 501 instead of 500. I usually like to use 500 in mine because I think it's a dark enough yellow that it makes for a great title. But what's great about using yellow is that if you do decide to embellish it at all, you can embellish it with warm colors. You can go reds, oranges on top of yellow, or you can embellish it with cool colors. You can do purples, greens, and blues on top of yellow.
Nice.
Yeah. So today, both this marker, or the FatOne, 30mm FatOne, and the 500 are included in my kit if anybody's interested in that. And I'm going to tear off a few pages here. I'm working in the hand lettering to-go pad. Oops. The cover if anybody wants to see that. The hand lettering learning pad to go. This is the small version of the practice pads that I designed for Neuland. And so I'll be writing on this and on a piece of flip chart paper that I also designed for Neuland, but I fold it in half. So before the to-go pad came out, when I wanted to practice tabletop, I would just take one of these, and I'll show you my other one, and I would fold it into quarters. Yep. So today I'm just simply going to write the word fiesta in a couple of different ways. I'm going to use the big one and an art marker, and I'm also going to show the fat one and an art marker, and I'll show you also how to do it with a big one and a fine one or other markers. So first, when you know you want to write really, really big, you're going to want to make what's called a pen scale. And a pen scale is when you take the pen width of any marker like this, and I would recommend that starting out, especially for practice, and I'm going to go ahead and mute you, or who's muted. I'm going to mute who's ever out there. There we go. Thank you. For practice, you'll want to start with a five width pen scale. And the reason why we do that is because when we go to draw, say, the letter E, and here's my stem, and I'm just going to show an F for now, but if we were to do an E, we would want to make sure there's enough counter space between those crossbars. And so taking a letter like this is Neuland Hand, and then I'm going to go ahead and add an inline stroke. But this inline is really more about being festive than anything. And so this inline stroke isn't like the straight inline stroke we would put just inside. I'm actually going to do sort of a wavy inline. And that's it. I don't even have to draw the rest of it. So another example of that, if I were to write just the word fiesta, and I will use my practice pad here. And again, I'm going to go ahead and make 5 pen widths high and write the word fiesta using a lettering style called Neuland Hand. Now, Neuland Hand was invented in 1940s, 1840s? I need to do my research some more. And it was a lettering style that was invented by a type designer who cut it out of tin. And so this is a little bit taller. Usually for Neuland Hand, we do a 3.5 to 4 pen widths high. I wanted you to see how this is one way that you can vary Neuland Hand. If I were to do it the actual size that it should be, it's very compressed, which makes it good for, maybe this size would be great for a title, maybe the smaller size. You can even make some of the letters touch where it's appropriate. This would be great for a topic size. And sometimes my S is not as traditional Neuland Hand as usual. They're usually very flat, but I like the S to take up a little bit more space. And what's great about Neuland Hand is that there can be lots of different variations. So one way that I would do something really festive, and again, add a little inline. You can make these inlines really curvy if you want. And I'm kind of practicing my thicks and thins. When we get to the S, I would probably just put it on the spine of the S, otherwise it would get really busy going throughout. For the T, sort of in the middle, maybe a little bit off to the left. And on the stem for the A, you could do either the left or the right, but traditionally the right side is what gets embellished in calligraphy. And then you could also do just a very thin line like this if you wanted to, or you could do, again, thicks and thins, making sure that the angle of your marker, in this case I'm just using the tip, but I'm using both the broad edge of the tip. If I have it pointed, I have my tip pointed down towards my paper, and I have it angled to the upper left. And so if I were to make marks going from top left to bottom right, they would look this way. And if I went from top right to bottom left, they would be thinner this way. And so this might be a fun way to make an inline showing both thicks and thins. And this time I chose to put it on that side. But I think it might look better when it comes to Fiesta for this embellishment to be on the right side. So the reason why I'm talking about Fiesta is because I'm going to spend Cinco de Mayo down in southern New Mexico. So I'm excited about that. And I wanted to let those of you know who are interested in signing up for my workshops before UViz that I've extended the early bird rate. And so if you're interested, let's see, I have some information here. I'm extending the early bird rate through the end of the weekend, and you can save $100 on the single day or $200 if you sign up for both days. And you can find out more by going to, and I made a short URL, bit.ly/UViz letters. Okay, there's just a few slots left, so I hope that you will join me, and I'll go ahead and unmute everybody. If you would like to ask any questions about lettering, I'm here to answer them. If you don't, I have a few questions that came from actually a live studio audience in a previous workshop that I'd be happy to answer for everybody here too. So whoever's on the line, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
How do you determine the space between the letters?
That is an excellent question. So when we're doing graphic recording and we're going, say, with a title, you want to have enough space between your letters so that when you're at the back of the room, say, I don't know, at least 15 or so feet, that you can actually read the word. Now, traditionally, Neuland Hand, all of the letters touch. If you can see behind me, you'll see one great big huge quote from a movie that's all done in Neuland Hand, and all those letters are touching. That's the way it's done in traditional calligraphy. But in graphic recording, I'd leave a little bit of extra space, especially if I'm going to do a title. So that would be the glance level of hierarchy. If you're doing, say, a topic, maybe a subtitle, then I would go ahead and make the letters smaller, and I would let them touch, because what that will do is it will bring your reader in. So it'll help bring them in closer so that they can even read some of the more smaller print. Does that make sense? Yeah, so in this case, if I were to do another piece of paper, if I were to do a title size, and actually, and for a word like, let's just say title, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it 4.5 pin widths so that you can see what an E would look like. There's my stem. In this case, I'm not going to make my crossbars very wide because it's a long word, and I want to make sure that I get all of this in here. I'm thinking about the space in between these letters. Now, the word title has a lot of verticals, so that space in between should be pretty equal. And then when I get to the E, and this is where you'll see there's plenty of space in between. Now, the reason why there's plenty of space in between is because I made this 4.5 pin widths high. And I actually, if you notice here, I actually angled my marker a little bit. Now, when I go to outline, say a title in another color, I also want there to be room between the letters for any outline or drop shadow that I attach. You don't have to, but it would keep it less confusing. It's cleaner for the eye. Also, you might be writing off the page here. Remember too that when you go to rewrite, when you go to trace your letters, I let my big marker do the really heavy lifting, and then I let however I choose to outline it really define the shape of the letter. And so I'm not too worried about spaces that maybe not get filled in, but here I probably should have made this stem a little bit longer, or this crossbar a little bit longer. Then I would have had to pull the L out a little bit. And I think it's fine for letters to touch every once in a while, but if it's going to be hard to read, think about spacing those letters out. Okay? What else? What other questions do we have? I can answer a few here. So someone asked me in a previous class, how do you keep level or straight when you're writing other than practice? And so what I recommend, and I mentioned this before, if you have lined paper, whether it's the to-go pad or the flip chart paper, or maybe I think there's some flip chart papers out there that have a grid, it's helpful to practice using lines and really notice where you're placing your letters if writing straight is important. That way, because we're so good at visualizing as visual practitioners, we can visualize where those lines are when we're actually graphic recording, okay? And then someone also asked me how to do clean, large lettering quickly. And I pretty much covered that just now. I use big markers to do that. I find that if I wanted to make a big, say I wanted to make a big letter E, how long did it take me to make that? Whereas if I needed to draw out a letter E, I would have to think about what that looks like. Then I would have to draw it. Then I would have to think about filling it in. That took a lot longer. And so I let my markers do the heavy lifting. I let them allow me to write very quickly. So for a title, whether I use yellow or red, a lot of times I'll use red or black because they'll really pop off the page because they'll be contrasty. I can write a title out in just a few seconds. And if I do use a light yellow, then I have time during the day while I'm graphic recording to go back and embellish it. And then I also got the question, how can I add variety to my go-to fonts? So a couple of things about language. Fonts are what we use on computers, but lettering styles, hand or script is what's called in calligraphy, but I use the term lettering styles a lot because they're hand-drawn. And so one way to add variety to any lettering style is to change the X height. And so with each, if you are using a practice pad, we have what's called a baseline, and that's where all your letters sit, an X height, and that's where any lowercase letter that doesn't have an ascender or a descender will fit within that space. And then of course we have the ascender line and a descender line. And so in any case, we want to change up any lettering style. If you want to change up the X height, say my X height is here, I'm going to go ahead and make my ascender up to here, and then any letters in between fit within this X height. Good. I love hearing other people's markers squeak. Do capital letters go up to the ascender line? That's an excellent question. As someone who's hand drawing letters, you can make that decision, but in traditional calligraphy, capital letters actually are slightly lower than the ascender. And so if you had like the letter A here, but then you had a letter B, that ascender would actually be a little bit taller in a lowercase letter, whereas a capital letter would actually be lower. Because we're drawing and we're drawing to be, where we're writing our letters, when we're graphic recording or sketchnoting, it's really up to you. You get to make that decision. But in traditional calligraphy, yes, the capital letters, the ascender is slightly lower. So if you did want to have a low X height and say, this is my baseline, here is my X height, and here is my ascender, then wherever the small part of that letter, and any letter that doesn't have an ascender, would go lower like this. But your ascender is going to stay the same. And remember, with the letter T, we don't go all the way up to the ascender line. The reason for that is because we don't want to confuse T with other letters like F and things like that. And then if we were to have a high X height, remember, there's my baseline. This is going to be a higher X height, and that's my ascender line. So my letters are going to be larger. My ascender line is going to stay the same, but that X height changed. And I love this particular variation because you can do it to nearly any lettering style. And now you have a variation. And remember, any crossbar is also going to match that X height as well. So we have a couple of questions. Let's see. How to manage letter spacing in curving captions. Yes. Captions, I think you mean like a curving baseline. And is it a good idea to use curving text or captions in graphic recording readability-wise? That's an excellent question. I know a lot of people that use curved baselines. I think that's what you're meaning. Let's see. I have another piece of paper here. I'll flip this over. A lot of times I'll use a pencil. Actually, I'll just use a small, fine one, black one, so you can see. When you say curving captions, I'm assuming you mean like a curved baseline like this, or maybe one that's like a wave. And so in terms of spacing, what I recommend is the width of your letters. Each letter has a different width, and depending if it's round or a straight letter or a letter that's shaped like a triangle, it's going to have its own relationship to another letter. So there's not, I can't tell you that I wouldn't recommend mechanical spacing, and that's where you have the same spacing between each letter. I would recommend volume spacing. What I mean by that is whether, like I said, whether it's a square letter or a triangular letter or a circle-shaped letter, that you're going to have space in between, and this is volumetric spacing. And so if we were to keep going, let's make this into a square. The volume between, say, a triangular letter and a circle, the volume should still be the same if it's a circle next to a square. But a way to make sure that your letters are straight and really readable is to imagine, if we're thinking about perspective like drawing, imagine here's your baseline and here is a dot over here or way down into your, off the page. Imagine that you're going to make all of your letters follow that baseline. So what we have here is a right angle, right, on both sides. No matter where I go, it's perpendicular from this line, and these are all imaginary lines, but this line to your baseline. And so your word would curve as it goes around the baseline and would be going along those lines. And that would be the same if it were curved this way. So here you've got these right angles, and then they would start to go this way. And so this is a little more like that. That makes sense. Okay? All right. Any other questions? Maybe a sec. I love hearing all the clips and everybody's got their markers out. That's great. I'd love to see your work. Please feel free to post it on the events page that I just put out for the Lettering Tips Tuesday. I'm going to be live all month. I will put up a different Zoom link each time. I thought I was going to go live on Facebook, but that wasn't so easy this morning. I think those of you know that watch me that I'm great at lettering and I'm pretty good at technology, but together I don't always pull it off. So if you're comfortable with Zoom, I'd love to see you here next week, same time, and I will put a new a link up so that people can join us, and I'll edit this a little bit and post it on Facebook so others can see it. And if you have any more questions after the show, no worries, just post those in the event page and I will answer them the next time we meet. So thanks for joining me. Great, I'm so glad you guys are gonna post samples. That'll be awesome. Whether it's this or even if you want feedback, I'm gonna stay live all the month of May. I'm also currently working on a book that should come out in July. And I just want to find out, what are people interested in? What do they want to learn? And so again, if you're going to UViz, just want to do another plug for the upcoming workshop, and I hope you'll join me. All right, thanks everybody, bye.